listening to the Remso Republic.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's episode of the Remso Republic. I'm your host, Remso W. Martinez. I'd like to thank you all for listening into a premiere episode. I hope you've enjoyed all the mini-sodes we've done up until this point. For those of you that survived the pilot, I read your criticism, your feedback, your love, your hatred, and we've gone ahead and made all the changes, especially with the voice department. I know that some of you were having a hard time listening to that. But here it is, the actual start of the show. And unlike Bill Weld, I have the actual OG libertarian podcaster in the house. He's the host of the Lions of Liberty podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause from wherever you are in your car. Don't take your hands off your steering wheels, but you get what I'm saying. Mr. Marc Clair. How are you doing, Marc?
Remso, what's going on, man? It's great to be here on your first episode. I'm extremely honored, by the way, to be chosen as your first guest.
You know, this is really kind of full circle for me. I started listening to your show probably around 2013, 2014, the first episode that I listened to.
That's right in the beginning. That's before I smoothed out the edges. Not that the edges are ever fully smooth, but they were about as rough as they could be back then.
You know, your show is probably one of the best quality libertarian podcasts out there, because this is when we were just getting that niche market for alternative media. And I remember at the time I was just learning about what libertarianism was, what these ideas were, and I just went on the iTunes podcast section. I just put libertarianism, and yours was the first one that was there.
It's good to know that search engine works, too, because I put those keywords in there. So it's great to hear an actual confirmation from a human that you can actually find me just by searching at libertarian. That's actually amazing.
It's that easy, and that shows you the demands that people have for this type of content. I mean, it's so hard to listen to an alternative view these days. I mean, you've got to go into like the twilight danger zone parts of the internet to sometimes listen to this type of conversation go on, because many people still consider it fringe. But we're getting people on the left and right who want to listen to a more free market, liberty-minded voice with common sense for once. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing.
So if I'm Bill Weld, is you asking me to be your first guest, is that like akin to Gary Johnson's begging the delegates to give him Bill Weld? Is there an analogy here we can make?
Please give me Marc Clair for my first show. I can't do it without Marc Clair. Please.
I will not be able to get any attention from the mainstream media to this podcast unless you give me Marc Clair.
It was kind of like an audience hostage crisis. It's like, if you can't give us Marc on your first episode, well, screw you, man.
You're not getting a show then.
Just shut down the entire thing.
I've never really felt more awkward, honestly. It's just doing nothing more than sitting on my laptop watching something, as I was with the Libertarian Convention, than seeing Gary Johnson just practically on his hands and knees. I mean, he wasn't literally, but I mean, I bet he would have if he thought he could get away with it, and just begging for this guy to be his vice president. It was just, it was honestly sad. And for the record, Remso's invitation to the show was nothing like that. It was very normal, very straightforward. It went very smoothly.
There was only groveling towards the end when you were like, oh no, I've got to consider it, man.
Yeah, I mean, I got to make you grovel a little.
Yeah, you know, you're at that stage in your life with your show and everything where you can afford to do that. But no, that's actually what I want to talk to you about today. What we're seeing is a large boom in this conversation going. We've seen it since its birth, really, with Ron Paul in 2008. We saw a boom right after the 2012 election. And even though, you know, the times seem like we're seeing a fascist element, a more nationalistic element occur, this conversation hasn't died down. People said that the libertarian moment was over, but we're seeing it, I mean, just light up brush fires in people's minds throughout the country. Do you think that this is something that dies down or it gets better? What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was told the libertarian moment ended when Rand Paul endorsed Mitt Romney 4 years ago, and then that was the end. We were all gonna put our books away and just play things straight from now on, mainstream again. But no, I mean, I think it's very clear that there's a strong desire out there, not necessarily specifically for libertarian ideas per se, but there's you're starting to see a sea change, and you're seeing this play out in our current electoral cycle, that people are searching for something different. They might not be able to pinpoint what that is, but they're pissed off. They're realizing that what they've been doing has not been working, and you're seeing that reaction manifests itself through Bernie Sanders, who, while his campaign is going to end, it certainly did present something different, something that spoke to that sense of injustice that many people feel. And then, of course, on the other side, you have Donald Trump, who's, I mean, if you actually break down the positions these guys are laying out there and the kind of things that they're saying, they're not that far off. They're playing to that same populist base. They're playing to that same sense of injustice that so many people feel out there. And I think that's going to cause people to not only look for other political solutions, but in the electoral sense, but also just in the ideas sense. And you did that yourself when you started searching iTunes for libertarian. I mean, well, not to flip this whole thing around and take over your show, but I'm kind of curious what even inspired you to get to that point. Like, why were you even searching libertarianism in the first place? I swear I won't do this for the whole show. But I guess
it's not a problem.
One question.
That's a great question. You know, when people ask me kind of like my origin story for these ideas, I start off with saying I think I was Mitt Romney's absolutely worst volunteer. I mean, I realized that small government was good, limited taxation was good. I had this generally conservative mindset growing up. But with Mitt Romney, I knew that I didn't want, President Obama to have a second term. I thought with the Republicans back in charge, we get, the exact opposite of what we had been having with Obamacare, less of the scandals, less of the craziness we had been seeing. I didn't realize that, if you just looked back at the past 8 years, we were having pretty much the exact same thing with George Bush. So I sign up to be a volunteer for Mitt Romney. I'm getting all the emails from the local GOP, and all I see is just absolute madness. There is no principle. There is no idea of let people actually be individuals and live their lives as long as they're not hurting people and taking their stuff. So before I could even knock on one door, I was like, you know what? I think I need to really sit this one out. So eventually, I'm just really disenfranchised with the whole thing. Obama wins a second term. And I was in high school at the time. I was a senior in high school. And one of my teachers was starting up a young conservatives club. And I remember going in there. I mean, I considered myself kind of a young Tea Partier at the time. I'm like, you know what, guys, we're going to go back and teach constitutionalism, teach federalism in its proper respects. We're going to talk about things that actually matter to conservatives. And the pretty large group, I think there were like 40 people in this small, high school conservative club. They're like, yeah, that's all nice, but we need to win. If people want to raise taxes, let's just, raise less taxes than the Democrats. If people want Obamacare, well, let's just make it Republican care. It seemed like there was absolutely no sense of what conservatism was. And as I became really disenfranchised with the philosophy itself, I went back to my role model, Ronald Reagan. I read his memoirs, and I read the section where he was like, the heart and soul of conservatism is libertarianism. And I'm like, what's that funny word? So next thing you know, I pulled a Justin Amash, and I just start Googling libertarianism. And I'm seeing guys like F.A. Hayek, Ludwig von Mises come up, and I'm like, why are all these Austrian dudes popping up out of nowhere? And that's just where it started. From there, I started listening to the Cato Daily podcasts. I started looking more into these issues. I don't want to say this because it's like nails to a chalkboard, but I considered myself fiscally conservative and socially liberal. And at the time, I thought, well, maybe that's
pulling a Gary on me.
It's harsh, but that's how I came into it. And later down the road, as I really started to expand my mind on these thoughts, I was like, you know what? This isn't just a flavor from there and a flavor from here. This is a distinct ideology based on putting the individual above the collective masses. This is about putting individual liberty above every other democratic idea that comes out there. Because if you don't place an emphasis on individual freedom, if you don't place an emphasis on open minds and free markets, you have nothing. And that's when I threw everything else behind, and I was like, this is who I am. I understand it was fringe. I thought I was the only person in the world of those ideas. But one day, all I had to do was go on iTunes and just put the keyword libertarianism on there. And next thing you know, I'm a Lions of Liberty fan, and I'm jumping on all these other shows because now I know I'm not the only one who thinks this way.
Well, that kind of is the first step, and when you become a libertarian or you start to think about these ideas, and I mean, you literally think you're the only one.
I thought I was the only one. I'm like, no one wants to, end the drug war while at the same time being a non-interventionist overseas and talk about the gold standard. It's like, how can you go from one concept to the other, and next thing you know, you're talking about Bitcoin and the NAP, and I mean, just it all seemed fragmented at the time. For me, I mean, it took me a while to understand how once you apply the principles of liberty, peace, tolerance, individualism, free markets, and limited government, once you have those as your core principles, everything else just makes sense. And I don't think a lot of people who, they're like your Beltway Republicans, they listen to a little bit of talk radio, they watch Fox News, they just know that liberalism and progressivism are bad. I don't think a lot of those people can easily jump on board with these ideas. It takes time, but it also needs an ignition to get it started.
Sure, and we're so trained. From the very first time we learned about politics, probably in school. I mean, we had mock elections in school. I mean, who was on my mock election ballot? Although, interesting thing, I grew up in an interesting time in the 90s where I actually remember a mock election ballot that had a Republican, a Democrat, and another guy, an independent, had Ross Perot on it. So we've actually seen some of this manifest before politically, where people are sick and tired of things. Even 20 years ago, we already went through a round of this, and Ross Perot gained way more traction than I had no intention of talking about Ross Perot today. By the way, it's amazing what kind of tangents we can go on. But I was about to I was going to try to make a point, and then I had to contradict my own point. I was going to say, "Oh, we're in school, and they always only tell us about the Republican and the Democrat." But I just remembered, well, no, actually, they had Ross Perot back then. So, I mean, I guess we have seen hints of this happening before, but Ross Perot was really Trumpian in a way. I mean, against the trade agreements, really playing to that populist side of things. And,
I mean, who could forget that giant sucking sound?
There will be a giant sucking sound going south.
It's gonna just take those jobs and just suck them up like a vacuum. My Ross Perot is terrible. Please do not use that in your promotional activities for this program.
That was perfect.
I've got a few impressions, but my Perot needs work.
It was almost Dana Carvey level. Oh my gosh, we sound old. I bet
it was almost a little like Dana Carvey doing George Bush. It was like, it's just not gonna do it. They're gonna take our jobs, just suck them right up in that vacuum with NAFTA. Don't do it. Not gonna do it. Good Lord.
Oh my gosh, for our viewers who are like 16, 17 years old, remember, SNL used to be good before it became absolutely terrible.
It used to actually be the best show on television. Like, no doubt.
And now it's just a regurgitation of everything you see on MSNBC.
But when they get Larry, this is one reason I was sort of rooting for Bernie Sanders in the back of my mind, not in any sort of public way, but in the fact of knowing one of these clowns is going to be president. At the time, Larry, the idea of having 4 years of Larry David on doing impressions of Bernie Sanders on Saturday Night Live, that was very appealing to me.
That would have made everything so much better. But Mark, it's great that you bring up Bernie Sanders right now, because that's what we're going to start off with right after this commercial break. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Remso Republic. Hold on fast. We'll be back soon.
Take the show on the go by subscribing to the Remso Republic on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Play, and YouTube. Don't be left out.
Everyone has an opinion, but not everybody can stand on what they say. Sometimes what we need is a record. We need people who have a history, people who've been in the trenches, and people that know what they're saying. If there's one side I can rely on, it's the Liberty Conservative. The Liberty Conservative hosts writers from all over the liberty movement, from activists to candidates, to radio hosts to pundits. Whether you call yourself a constitutional conservative, a classical liberal, a libertarian, or whatever, what matters is this. If you want liberty, uncensored freedom, 24/7, 365 days a year, you're not going to get it from any better source than the Liberty Conservative. Welcome back to the show. Mark, you just brought up Bernie Sanders and how we both would have loved Larry David to continue as him for 4 years. And this brings up a good point. Earlier, we were talking about how these ideas are becoming more popular, the ideas of liberty, the ideas of free markets, non-intervention, limited government. But while we see a surge in these liberty conversations starting to spread, in my heart, I think it's really sad that most of America saw Bernie Sanders as a viable option for governing instead of Rand Paul. And even though Bernie's about to fizzle out and pull an establishment con and endorse Hillary Clinton, does that also show that maybe we're not necessarily, getting as much of a momentum compared to the left at this point?
Yes, sort of. I mean, it's look, there's the thing with Rand Paul, the way he presents his ideas.
Popular question from Google is Rand Paul still running for president? And I don't know, I wouldn't be doing this dumbass live streaming if I weren't.
And I don't really even fault him for it, because we should try to be logical and present a rational case for things. And that it kind of is what Rand Paul would do up there on the debate stage. He would say, well, the thing is this, and he'd lay out the 7 reasons why we need to maybe cut the budget or something. And everything he say might make total sense. The problem is the voting public generally doesn't care if you make sense. They want to be told things that make them feel like you will, just fix whatever problems that they have in life. They want you to touch their feels and fix them. And that's what Bernie Sanders does. He knows that a lot of people out there are frustrated with the price of healthcare and the fact that they can't get it. And even with Obamacare, they're still feeling this pain even worse. Who cares what the cause of that is? But he's going to say some things that make you want to. And I'm not saying he's just catering to them, because for all intents and purposes, it seems like Bernie Sanders has legitimately held these socialist beliefs for a long time. So, when you have a system that is so crony capitalist, that is fascist at its nature, the American economy, it shuts people out. And when you shut people out, you're going to create anger in people. And now people might not realize, oh yeah, the reason I'm shut out of medical care is because the AMA monopolized the industry years ago, and that's only led to higher prices, and then more government interventions have made things even worse. People aren't thinking that. People are just thinking, I can't get health care. This is way too expensive. What are you going to do about it, Mr. Politician? And while Rand Paul is up there trying to make a rational case for why we might want to not have Obamacare, Bernie Sanders is out there saying, you're getting screwed. These people are screwing you over, and we're going to give it to you. The government's going to take your money. We're going to take a little more money, and we're going to give you everything you need for free, because that's what the government should do, and we're going to save your lives and fix your lives, and things are going to be great. Flowers, unicorns, and happiness for everybody. Also working on the Bernie impression. I mean,
it's spot on, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I don't know if I'm quite at Larry David levels, but I guess if he can't commit to it, I mean, maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe Bernie will get like a Secretary of State position or something, and he'll still be out there in the public eye to the extent that it makes sense for Larry David to continue his impressions. But if not, I don't know. I feel like my impression wobbles back and forth between Bernie Sanders and like Tony Danza. I'm still kind of working.
Now I've got that stuck in my head at this point. I'm never gonna be able to look at it the same way again.
You're just gonna hear, free healthcare for everyone, including Angela and Jonathan, Samantha, my daughter. Yeah. More 25-year-old references for the kids out there.
They'll catch on.
Who's the Boss, guys? Excellent program. Look it up. I'm sure there are episodes on YouTube.
The hipsters out there are just writing down all these notes right now. It's like, I need to make sure that I can bring back the 90s right now.
Tony Danza. Are there 2 Z's in Danza? I'm writing it down right now.
Let's just assume there are and carry on from there. But yeah,
it's easier to sell free stuff and to sell solutions that don't have that aren't necessarily logical. It's easy to say what's easy, and it's easier to say the government will give you healthcare than to explain why we need to curb, roll back all these regulations, and how eventually we'll have a free market that will save people. And when you can't speak to what people are feeling, and you're going to have problems. And I don't know what the solution is, but I can definitely see what some of the problems are.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a larger topic for me, because I'm involved with the Libertarian Party of Virginia, and I was out in Loudoun County for the Libertarian Party of Loudoun County meetup a while ago. And we were at this coffee place, and we stayed until closing. And I just remember the vice chair, my friend Brian Sujane, and he went over and he was talking to the cashier, and she was like, "Oh, so what are you guys? Are you like a men's club or something?" According to some, but it's like she was like, "Is this a men's club or something?" And he's like, "No, we're the Libertarian Party. This is what we believe." And up until that point, she had been a Bernie Sanders supporter. But all we had to do was talk about the civil liberties aspect of that, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, if Bernie does not become the Democratic nominee, I might as well vote for whoever the Libertarian is at the time." This was before Gary Johnson, clinched the nomination. But I like what Matt Kibbe always says, and you did an interview with him a few months back. It's that politics is a lagging indicator of social change. And I don't necessarily go as far as Gary Johnson does when he says, "I think in everyone's heart there's a libertarian," because I believe in a lot of people's heart there's also an authoritarian. I think we see that in our policies. But at the same time, I don't think a lot of people, I think it's because of the hyper-polarized partisan environment we have, instead of working to get halfway to a point that we both agree on, for a lot of people it's all or nothing. And that brings me to my next point. As a culture, do you consider the fact that this is an issue we're having? Do you think we're going in a more liberty direction, or are we going backwards in that case?
Well, here's the thing. It's never really all or nothing, and in some ways things are becoming more libertarian, you might say, in certain areas, such as the war on drugs. I do feel like a lot of progress is being made there in some ways. I mean, here in California, we had Prop 47 last year, which essentially, for all intents and purposes, decriminalized drugs in California. If you have drugs for personal use, I think you can maybe get an $80 fine at this point, below a certain amount. Now, that's not full libertarian position. It's not completely making drugs legal, and some libertarians might say, "Oh, you can't go out and vote for propositions because voting is violence, and this doesn't even it only gives the state more power over your body." And it's like,
man, it's aggression.
Yeah, and I'm just like, shut up, because this bill gets people out of jail that have harmed nobody. So shut up, because you might. I mean, I'm about as purist as I can get in my beliefs, but reality exists, and the fact is that some laws, and we can either repeal some laws or create some new laws and some of those things can actually help people. They can release people from jail. So I don't really give a crap about your philosophical purity that you think you have, because I honestly think my application is what's pure, is actually moving in some sort of direction that actually helps people. Now, there's a couple ways you can compromise. You can compromise and move in the right direction. You can also compromise and abandon your principles. So it's important to be aware of what kind of compromise you're trying to make. But in certain cases, I definitely think that we are moving in the right direction. At the same time, while it feels like the war on drugs is getting better, I mean, marijuana is being decriminalized all across the country and legalized all across the country. At the same time, I don't see the FDA going anywhere. I don't see massive movements trying to end that side of the war on drugs, the side of the war on drugs nobody ever talks about, the fact that you need to spend billions of dollars to get a drug that might help somebody to the market. And unless you already have billions, you're not going to do that. You're just not going to be able to battle the regulatory beast that's out there. And how many people's lives are being lost because they just can't get a drug that we'll never even know could have existed. There are drugs we might never know could have existed because the FDA, or maybe they'll exist in some third world country, and we'll have to take a trip to Nicaragua to get the medicine I need. But
I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's a Democrat about the very same issue. It's how bureaucracy prevents us from actually doing amazing things for society. And the biggest kind of example I bring up is the movie Dallas Buyers Club, where where Matthew McConaughey and his friend Jared Leto, they have to go to Mexico to meet the scientist who's creating this drug that can help lower the symptoms of HIV and AIDS. And they try and go the legal route and get FDA approval, but the FDA is like, no, we don't like some of the ingredients and chemicals.
Yeah, can you guys just wait like 7 years on this? And then, we're going to be dead then. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, think how many thousands of people died because the FDA's incompetence. Think how far back we brought ourselves because we refused to at least try something out. And that's what brings me back to my original point that we spoke about in the first segment. It's the idea that if you don't own yourself, if you're not free to make your own decisions that impact your life, then what are you at that point?
You're just a little worker bee.
Exactly. That's not freedom. And, I argue this with Democrats quite often as much as I do Republicans. You have the right to make decisions that are self-destructive. Now, they freak out. They're like, oh, well, that's terrible. I'm like, yeah, but what's the next approach? Because you're going to put out some policy or some legislation out there, and what becomes of it? You've got to enforce that at gunpoint. You've got to take away more liberties in order to compensate for something that's only hurting one person. And while the government should not be able to intervene in that, what are you as another individual doing? Maybe this is your friend. Maybe this is your sister, your brother, your mother. Maybe there's a coworker. I don't think people want responsibility put upon themselves. They want to, leverage that out and give more of it to the state. And that's where we get these problems.
Sure. I mean, so many people, look, I live out here in California, so I see this mentality all the time. I mean, for many, the government is the only solution. If there is a problem, okay, that's what they legitimately believe this. I mean, they actually feel, that's the thing when we talk to people who are progressives, we have to realize that our definition of government, when libertarians think government is either, some libertarians might think it's a gang of thieves writ large, or some libertarians might think it's just a possibly legitimate means of arbitering justice or something like that. But to progressives, they legitimately believe government is there to solve every problem. And I'm not joking. This is actually what they believe. So when you realize that mentality that they have, you can talk to them. You can at least realize that that's where they're coming from. And I don't really think you can even craft a lot of arguments that we want to make on an issue-by-issue basis, because they're living on literally a different philosophical planet when it comes to what government should be doing. So you kind of got to take a different approach sometimes and try to point out some of their inconsistencies, not in a way of, I want to prove you wrong, but in kind of what you were saying, point out how X policy can harm someone if that was their daughter or their mother or whatever. Try to point out, situation. And this is not easy. I'm not saying I know how to win progressives over, because my God, especially out here, I mean, some people are lost causes. I think that's the biggest thing you have to realize sometimes. Sometimes you just got to stop the conversations with somebody. And if you like him as a friend, you keep him as a friend, and you just try to keep that stuff to the side, because some people don't want to hear it. And the fact is, those people are irrelevant at the end of the day. They're irrelevant to the political conversation, because those people are not going to be catalysts for change, and they're just going to be there, and they're going to be parroting things. And at some point, when the prevailing political culture changes, they will change their views, because they're followers. They're not leaders. So when you find enough followers who don't want to follow you right now, you just put them to the side, because eventually they'll follow things when the culture changes. So that's where we got to kind of focus.
No, I think you're exactly right on that. So anyway, folks, we're going towards our last segment, the surprise lightning round. Give us just a minute for this quick commercial break, and we'll be back soon. You're listening to the Remso Republic.
Remso in the mix.
Do you have a business or product you want to promote to new audiences? Well, if you're interested, contact the Remso Republic for great advertising ideas and possibly a deal with us today at remsorepublic@gmail.com. All right, we are back with our special guest, Marc Clair from the Lions of Liberty. This is the lightning round segment. We're going to ask Marc 5 questions, some regarding topics we discussed on today's episode, some coming out of left field. He will have 1 minute to answer each question. Marc, are you ready?
I am ready. I'm ready to roar.
All right.
I had to sneak in my plugs.
Hey, it works, man. It works. All right. So anyway, question number 1. In under a minute, what is libertarianism to you?
Wow. That should be the easy one. It's actually a very difficult one, because it's a very difficult concept to explain. So I'll do my best. To me, libertarianism is the idea that individuals have rights, and all of every single policy, every single nuanced position we take, everything needs to flow from that first number one. So I don't have maybe the same definition of libertarianism as a lot of other libertarians. I mean, some people are anarcho-capitalists and property rights comes first, but to me, property rights can only stem from individual rights. So everything needs to focus on the individual. Now, a lot of libertarians have different interpretations they're going to take from that. And if you go to the Libertarian Party convention, you're going to see 17 kinds of libertarians and many of which have very different worldviews. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to realize anarcho-capitalism or anarchy and minarchism are not close. They're extremely different worldviews. One says governments are okay. One says governments are not okay. So these are serious things we need to sort out. But at the end of the day, if you're basing your political beliefs on the concept of individual rights, I'm happy to agree that you are a libertarian, and that as long as we're basing our conversation from there, we can outside of whatever nuanced positions we take from that point, we can work out. But that is, I guess, basically what I would say a libertarian is: someone who's focused primarily on individual rights.
Perfect. Question number 2. Should you require people to have a driver's license in order to operate a vehicle?
Not a libertarian. He wants people to have licenses to drive cars.
Yes, because he's reasonable.
Okay, I love this question because it's the one that you get when you talk about like gun control. Someone will say, "Oh, I guess you're against driver's licenses too." And Gary Johnson got booed for saying he was okay with driver's licenses. Here's the thing: driver's licenses are a tough issue because we're looking at everything through government, through that progressive lens in a way, where the government controls the roads. So that's why libertarians are mad about driver's licenses sometimes, because they don't think the government should be able to tell you that you can or cannot drive. And now, from the standpoint of a coercive government, yeah, that's not what necessarily a role that government should have, telling you can or cannot drive. However, if we think about the quote-unquote free society and private property, if roads are based on private property, no matter how that plays out, and I can go through Walter Block's entire books on these things, but I only have a minute. People that own roads are going to want people to prove, most likely, that they know how to operate a vehicle, that they have not killed 3 people with DUIs in the last month. So there's legitimacy to the concept. It's just the fact that the property owner in today's scenario is the government. So it's kind of a catch-22. I'm not against the concept of driver's licenses. I'm against the concept of coercive governments taking a monopoly control over all the roads and saying we're going to be the ones who decide who gets the licenses. So I don't know if I answered the question, but basically conceptually, there's nothing wrong with driver's licenses. It's just the problem of the fact that we're looking through everything through government being the property owner.
Perfect. Question number 3. What flavor is a gay Nazi wedding cake?
Oh man, I'm gonna. This is a real question on your show.
This is a real question, Mark.
All right, I'm thinking
it's ticking. Come on now. Gay Nazi wedding cake.
All right. Well, I'm just going to have to visualize myself eating this gay Nazi wedding cake right now. I'm going to say it's just it's chocolate, but there's sprinkles and lots of them. That's the best I can do.
All right.
You guys can interpret it however you want.
Question number 4. Does the Libertarian Party make it accessible or unaccessible for newcomers to embrace the ideas of liberty?
That is a tough one. Now, I didn't come to liberty through the Libertarian Party, so I looked at the Libertarian Party kind of as an after the fact. Now that I've learned about liberty, let's see what these guys are up to. And on the surface, I kind of think, well, I don't know. Is Gary Johnson out there saying, well, I mean, I truly believe that 50% of Americans are fiscally conservative and socially liberal? I mean, is that making it accessible because people can relate to it? Maybe it is. But does that teach them about the ideas of liberty? I don't know. It's interesting what you said earlier, how that is how you used to look at things. So maybe if somebody is at least breaking away from that paradigm and they're thinking in the terms you used to, fiscally conservative, socially liberal, they hear Gary Johnson, then they show up at a convention, and then they meet, other crazy people that teach them about all sorts of other liberty concepts. I'm going to say they are. Why not? I mean, there's so much about the Libertarian Party that's not their fault. Everyone says, though, they never won, they never had success. Look, the system is set up so that third parties can't win and have success. So I'm not going to hold that against them. But, I think the Libertarian Party is at least, they're making an attempt to allow people to see them as acceptable and come in and learn about the ideas of liberty. I might not like all the strategies they use, but sure.
And our last and final question for the lightning round. Who would win a fight to the death? Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck?
Finish him.
What are they fighting over? Are they just like
they're fighting to the death? It's bad.
Are they fighting over like the last piece of steak in the world and they're the last 2 men alive, or are they gladiators just tossed into an arena? We'll go with that one. Okay.
They're in the Thunderdome, man. They've got to fight to the death.
See, doesn't Rush Limbaugh have like those ear problems and he was addicted to painkillers or something because of that? So I feel like in the scenario, Glenn might be a little more healthy, so maybe he's got the advantage. And Rush is let's say he's not the slimmest of chaps. I think he might have lost some weight in recent years, but I feel like Glenn's got a little more energy and spryness right now. So I'm gonna go Glenn Beck, but man, I don't know. I could see Rush just literally biting his head off too. So it's a tough one.
I could see Glenn Beck pulling a shank out somewhere.
Right? Yeah, he might be a little sneaky.
Who knows? So anyway, Glenn Beck.
Slight edge to Glenn Beck, but
all right, and
I love these questions.
And that is the lightning round. Mark, great job. So if people want to follow your show and everything you do, what are the ways that they can keep contact with you?
Oh, there are just so many ways. You can, of course, come over to Twitter. That's a popular one. People love the tweeting, at Lions of Liberty. Our main Facebook page, facebook.com/Lions of Liberty. But one thing I'd like people to do if they become fans of the show or they just enjoy this interview and want to have similar conversations to the ones we've had, we have these conversations every day in our private Facebook group. It's the Lions of Liberty Forum. You just type that in your search bar on Facebook, Lions of Liberty Forum. It'll pop right up. It's a private group, but we just want to make sure you're not a spam bot or anything. We actually do get, I literally block one person a day who is clearly like spam. It's like,
Does he throw out one of those Bernie Sanders dank memes at
No,
you?
not even. It's like Oba and Becky from Nigeria, and then you look at their profile, and there's like nothing political on it. It's just like, you're like, okay, you're not a real person. So, but yeah, we love you to come join the conversation with us. You can, of course, find the Lions of Liberty podcast. Hey, apparently you can find it just by searching libertarianism on iTunes, but you can also search Lions of Liberty on iTunes. You can find us at lionsofliberty.com, of course. That's where we house all of our podcasts and articles, although there's not been an article written by us in many months because we focus so much on podcasts, but we are looking to get back into the article and writing game soon too. So big things ahead for Lions of Liberty. Get on now, man. We're only gonna get crazier.
That is perfect. Anyway, Mark, thank you so much for being the first guest on the show.
Remso, again, I'm totally honored. It's been awesome to be here, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the premiere episode of the Remso Republic. Since this is our premiere weekend, just know that we have a second installment of the program coming to you tomorrow. We have syndicated columnist Katie Moyer joining us. So tune in tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm Remso W. Martinez. Have a great day. See ya.
Stay connected to Liberty's Rabble Rouser on Facebook and Twitter to stay up to date with the latest episodes, blogs, and other available content. What are you waiting for?